Story 1. The room at the end of the hall. Priya and Daniel got married on a Saturday in September. They had been together for 6 years, planned the wedding for 2, and spent 8 months choosing the honeymoon, a boutique hotel on the Amalfi Coast, 12 rooms, cliffside terrace, private dining, the kind of place that looked like something out of a film and cost approximately the same. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon after a flight to Naples, and an hour on a cliff road so narrow that Priya had stopped looking out the window at some point and just looked at her hands. The hotel sat at the very top of the cliff, small, old, stone, perfectly quiet in the way of places that have been there long enough to have absorbed everything around them. The owner, an older Italian man named Enzo, met them at the entrance. He was warm, gracious. He carried one of the bags without being asked. He walked them to their room himself, down a corridor with stone floors and low lighting, past room 3, past room 5, to the end of the hall, room 7. He opened the door and stepped aside without entering, just stepped aside, and waited. The room was beautiful. Stone walls that smelled faintly of salt and old plaster, an arched window looking straight out over the sea, a bed piled with white linen that Priya thought she might never want to leave. Flowers on the table, a small balcony with 2 chairs positioned toward the view. The air in the room was cool and still the way air in thick-walled old buildings always is. Priya stood at the window for a long time. Daniel came and stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. Enzo set the bag down quietly and told them dinner was at 8 and that someone would come to the terrace for drinks at 7 if they wished. Then he left. They heard his footsteps recede down the hall, quiet, even, getting further away. They spent the first day exactly as they had hoped, unhurried, slow, present. Enzo brought wine at dinner they hadn't ordered and said nothing about it. They went to bed at 11 with the window cracked. Priya fell asleep almost immediately. Priya woke up at 2:17 a.m., not gradually, all at once, the way you wake up when something has called you out of sleep rather than letting you drift out of it naturally. She lay completely still in the unfamiliar dark and tried to understand what had pulled her awake. The room was quiet. Daniel was asleep beside her. The sea was just audible through the cracked window, a sound she had already begun to find familiar, comforting even. She lay still and listened to it, and then she heard something else, underneath it, in the room, breathing. Not Daniel, not the sea, not the building, breathing. From the corner of the room, slow, even, completely steady. The breathing of something at rest, something that had been there for a while. Priya did not move. She lay completely still with her eyes open in the dark and listened. She told herself it was the building. Old buildings breathed in ways that new buildings did not. Pipes, settling stone, the movement of air through centuries of architecture. She had read that somewhere. She told herself this. The breathing continued, rhythmic, patient, like something that was not in any hurry, like something that had all the time it needed. Priya realized she had stopped breathing while she was listening. She made herself exhale, slowly. Then she reached for her phone on the nightstand, slowly enough that she wasn't sure why she was moving slowly. She turned on the flashlight. She pointed it at the corner of the room, a chair, the wall, nothing else. She held the light there for a long moment. The chair was wooden, old, small, positioned facing the bed. She had not noticed it facing the bed before. She lay back down, turned the light off, listened. The breathing started again. She lay there for 10 minutes, 20. Then she woke Daniel. He sat up. He listened. I can't hear anything, he said. It's in the corner, she said. Listen. He listened. I think it's the ventilation, he said. Old buildings. It's fine. She wanted to say that it didn't sound like ventilation, that ventilation had a mechanical quality, a consistency. This had a different quality. This had the quality of something that was choosing to breathe. She did not say any of this. She nodded. She lay back down. She did not sleep again. She lay there until the sky outside the arched window began to lighten, and she listened to the breathing in the corner of the room, and it did not stop once. Not until the sun came up. In the morning, she sat with her coffee for a long time before she said anything. Over breakfast on the terrace, she mentioned it to Enzo. She kept her voice light. She framed it as curiosity rather than complaint. Old buildings, strange sounds, nothing serious. He set down the coffee he was carrying and listened to her carefully. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked which room they were in. 7, she said. Enzo's expression did something she watched happen in real time, not dramatically, not fear, just a small shift, the kind that happens when someone hears something they had hoped they were not going to hear today. He looked at the sea. A long pause. Then, the breathing. Quietly, another pause. From the corner. Priya set down her own coffee. She had not told him it came from the corner. She had said she heard something in the room. She had not said where. "You know about it," she said. It was not a question. He looked at the sea for a moment. Then he nodded. "Has other guests reported this?" she asked. Enzo looked out at the sea for a long moment. "Room 7 has a history," he said. He looked out at the sea, a long pause. Long enough that she thought he had decided not to continue. Then, "Many years ago," he said, "a guest died in that room." He paused. In the chair in the corner. He had been ill for some time. His wife was staying in the room next door. She did not know he had passed until the morning. He paused again. She said she had heard his breathing through the wall all night. Slow and even, all night. But he had been gone for hours. Priya sat with her coffee and looked at Enzo. "Why did you put us in that room?" she asked. Enzo looked at her. "We put all the new couples in room 7, he said quietly. "For 40 years. He looked at his hands. "Nobody has ever complained before." Another pause. "They usually sleep straight through." Priya looked at him. "The chair," she said. "In the corner. Why is it facing the bed?" Enzo was quiet for a moment. "We turn it toward the window every morning," he said, "when we make up the room." He looked at her. "It is always facing the bed again by evening. We do not know why. Nobody has ever seen it move. We stopped trying to change it a long time ago." Priya and Daniel moved to room 3 that morning. Enzo arranged it without being asked. He simply said it was available, and they were welcome to it. He said it without apology and without further explanation, like a man who had moved couples from room 7 before. More than once, over 40 years, many more than once. Room 3 was on the other side of the hotel, a different view, quieter. They slept perfectly for the rest of the honeymoon. They did not talk about room 7 again until they were on the flight home. Priya mentioned the breathing, the corner, the chair facing the bed. Daniel said he had not heard anything. She looked at him. He was looking out the window. She decided not to ask whether he believed her. But Priya told me she thinks about room 7. She thinks about it specifically at 2:17 a.m. when she wakes up sometimes, for no reason, in the dark of her own bedroom. She lies still and listens, just to make sure the only breathing in the room is hers. So far, it always has been. She checks every night, just to be sure. Story 2. The Island. This story is about 2 people whose names I am not going to use. They asked me not to. What I will tell you is that they got married in the spring, that they chose a remote island in Southeast Asia for their honeymoon, that they had read every review, every blog post, every forum thread. They had watched 3 separate YouTube videos made by travelers who had stayed there. They had done their research thoroughly. They knew exactly what they were getting, or they thought they did. The island was small, 2 kilometers end to end, a handful of guest houses spread along one side of the beach. No roads, no cars, a single pier that the supply boat used twice a week. They arrived by longboat from the mainland. The crossing took 40 minutes. The water was so clear the whole way that she could watch the seafloor changing beneath them the entire journey.
Amen.
The island was everything the photographs had promised. White sand so fine it squeaked. Water that turned from green to blue to something close to glass depending on where you stood. Jungle pressing up against the beach on 3 sides, dense and completely still in the midday heat. The guest house was run by a family who had been on the island for 3 generations. Simple rooms with wooden shutters and ceiling fans and mosquito nets that hung from hooks above the beds like clouds. Open-air dining, a generator that the father ran until 10 p.m. and then shut off. After that, the island went dark in a way that cities never go dark. Completely dark, the kind of dark where you cannot see your hand in front of your face. The first 3 days were exactly what they had come for. They snorkeled in the morning before the sun got too high. They read in hammocks in the afternoon. They ate fresh fish cooked over an open fire as the stars came out. They were the only guests at the guest house, the only foreigners on the island. She told me it was the most peaceful she had felt in years. On the 4th night, something changed. They had gone to bed just before 10 p.m. The generator cut out on schedule. The fan slowed and stopped. The room went completely dark and completely silent. They lay in the heat, listening to the jungle, insects, the soft movement of the sea. At some point, she estimates it was around midnight, she heard footsteps on the wooden deck outside their room. Slow, measured, back and forth. She assumed it was the father, or the eldest son, one of the family checking on something before sleep. She turned over. She fell back asleep. In the morning, she mentioned it to the family's eldest daughter, who spoke some English. She kept it light. Just mentioned she had heard someone on the deck last night. The girl's expression changed immediately. Not fear, not surprise. Something closer to recognition, like someone hearing a familiar name. "You heard the walking," she said. It wasn't a question. "Last night," the woman confirmed. "Around midnight." The girl nodded slowly. "He walks every night," she said. "He has done this for as long as we have been here." The woman waited. "Who does?" she asked. The girl looked at her for a moment, then she said, "The man who was here before us." And she went inside. She did not come back out for a long time. That afternoon, the woman found the father sitting by himself mending fishing nets at the end of the pier. She sat down beside him. She waited until he looked at her, then she asked. He was quiet for a while, looking at the net in his hands. Then he told her. Before the family had bought the guest house, it had been owned by a foreign man, a European. He had come to the island on a trip, planned to stay for 2 weeks. That was 11 years before his death. He never left. Not once, not to the mainland. Not anywhere. He had fallen in love with the island completely. He sold everything he had on the mainland, everything back home. He bought the guest house. He lived alone on the island for 11 years. The family on the mainland knew about him. They said he was the happiest they had ever seen a person be. He died on the island, on the deck, of natural causes, alone. His body was not found for 3 days. The supply boat came on the Wednesday. That was how they knew. The family bought the property 2 years later. They renovated. They rebuilt the deck entirely. New boards, new railing, new everything. They changed everything they could change. But the walking never stopped. He doesn't know he should leave, the father said. He said it without drama, without lowering his voice. Just a fact about the place where he lived. The way you'd mention the direction the tide came in. The couple spent one more night on the island. She told me she is not sure why. Maybe they needed confirmation. Maybe they were not ready to leave something that beautiful over something that frightening. Maybe they needed to be sure they had heard what they heard. Maybe they were not quite ready to give up the island. They went to bed at 10 when the generator cut out. They lay in the heat in the dark, neither of them sleeping. Just waiting. The air in the room was thick and humid. She could smell the salt water through the walls. The wooden deck outside creaked faintly in the heat. At midnight exactly, the footsteps started, back and forth, slow and even and completely without variation. The same pace, the same path, like something that had been walking this route for years. She told me she reached over and found her husband's hand in the dark. He was already reaching for hers. They lay there listening. Then something changed. The footsteps stopped their back and forth pattern and moved toward their room. She told me she held her breath. The footsteps stopped directly outside their door and stayed there. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. For almost a full minute, there was complete silence. Just the jungle, just the sea, just whatever was standing on the other side of their door. Then it was gone. Neither of them heard the footsteps leave. No sound of movement away from the door. No footsteps retreating. One moment it was there. The next, it was not. And a minute later, the footsteps were back on the deck, back and forth. As if nothing had happened, back to their pattern, back and forth, back and forth. Until sometime after 2 a.m. when they stopped completely, and the island went quiet, and they lay there until it was light. They took the first boat to the mainland in the morning. They spent the rest of the honeymoon on the mainland, in a large hotel, in a city, with many other people, with doors that locked properly, and no decks. She told me the part she thinks about most is not the footsteps. It is what the girl said. He doesn't know he should leave. She thought about what that meant for a person. To love somewhere so completely that after everything ends, you are still there, still walking in the dark. Because leaving has not occurred to you, she found that more disturbing than anything she expected to find on a honeymoon. I think she's right. Story 3, What Followed Them Home. I want you to pay close attention to this one, because this is the story that starts like the others and then goes somewhere different, somewhere worse. James and Nadia got married on a Friday evening in October. Small wedding, 30 people, just family and close friends. They were both 34. Private people, not the kind of couple who posted everything online or needed an audience for the things that mattered to them. For the honeymoon, they chose a remote cabin in the mountains of North Carolina. A week, just the two of them, no phone signal to speak of. The listing had said intermittent at best, no neighbors within sight, no noise except the trees and whatever lived in them. They drove up on the Saturday morning after the wedding. 6 hours. The last 2 miles unpaved. The cabin sat in a small clearing at the end of a dirt road. Log walls, stone fireplace, a porch overlooking a valley that went on for miles. First 3 days were everything they had wanted. Morning walks, long afternoons, evenings by the fire. James told me it was the first time in years he had felt genuinely switched off. On the 4th night, James woke up at 3 a.m. He lay still. The cabin was quiet. The fire had gone down. He could hear the trees, wind moving through them, the particular sound of a forest at 3 a.m., which is not silence, but is close to it. Then he heard something else, something on the porch, a sound that did not belong to the wind or the trees, a slow creak of weight on wooden boards, deliberate, the sound of a footstep. He sat up, listened. It came again, one step, then another, moving across the porch, toward the bedroom window. He put his hand on Nadia's shoulder. She woke up immediately. He pointed toward the window. She listened. They sat together in the dark bedroom and listened to whatever was outside move slowly and steadily across the porch. One step, a pause, another step, getting closer to the window. Then one final step, right outside the window that looked out from the bedroom over the valley. Then silence. Complete silence. The curtain was drawn. They could not see through it, but they could hear it on the other side of the glass. Still, present, breathing, slow and even. Nadia reached for James's hand under the blanket. He felt how cold her fingers were. His heart was going. He was aware of that. He picked up his phone from the nightstand. No signal, but the flashlight worked. He moved to the window. He stood in front of the curtain for a moment, just standing there, just on this side of it. Then he pulled it aside. The porch was empty. The valley beyond was dark and completely still. Nothing out there, nothing visible. He checked the front door, locked. He checked the back door, locked. He checked every window on the ground floor, all locked from the inside. Nothing had come in. He went back to bed. They lay awake for a long time without saying much. There was not much to say. Around 5 a.m., they fell asleep. In the morning, James went out to the porch with his coffee. He stood there for a moment before he saw it. The railing. There was frost on the railing, a thin layer, the kind of cold night that leaves everything dusted. And in the frost on the railing outside the bedroom window, there were 2 handprints, side by side, pressed into the frost, gripping the rail. From the outside, palms toward the cabin. Fingers facing in, larger than his own, like someone had stood on the other side of the railing, on the outside of the porch, where there was nothing to stand on, and gripped the rail, and looked in. James stood there and looked at the handprints for a long time. He photographed them. Then he went inside and told Nadia. She came out and looked. Then she went back inside and said they needed to pack. They did not call the police. They had no signal. They made the decision together, quickly. They packed everything. They were in the car and down the dirt road within an hour. They drove to the nearest town. They found a motel. They called the sheriff's department from the motel landline. A deputy drove up to check the cabin. He found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No signs of anyone having been inside. Just the marks on the railing, which by then had mostly melted. He said it was probably an animal. He said bear paws could sometimes resemble handprints in frost. James listened to all of this. He said thank you. He hung up. He did not believe it was a bear. Bears do not stand at a window and breathe. They drove home the next day, a week early. 5 days of the cabin rental still paid for and waiting. They left it. They did not discuss going back for the remainder. They just drove. 6 hours back the same way they had come. James told me the drive felt different from the drive up. He said the trees still pressed close on either side on the way out, but they did not feel the same. They agreed not to talk about it too much, to let it settle, to give it time to become the story you tell at dinner parties instead of the thing that keeps you awake. 3 weeks later, James woke up at 3 a.m. He lay still. The bedroom was dark. The house was quiet. Then he heard it. A creak on the floorboards outside the bedroom door. Slow, deliberate, one step, then another, moving toward the door. He woke Nadia. They both listened. The footsteps stopped directly outside the bedroom door and stayed there. James got up. He crossed the room. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. He checked every room in the house, every window, every door, everything locked, everything empty. He stood in the hallway of his own home in the middle of the night and tried to apply the same logic he had applied at the cabin. Old house, settling floors, pipes. But this house was not old. They had bought it 3 years ago, new build, nothing settling, nothing expanding in the cold. He went back to bed. He did not sleep. It happened again 5 nights later, and again 4 nights after that, always at 3 a.m., always the same pattern. Footsteps in the hallway, stopping outside the door, staying there. James told me they tried everything. They had the house inspected, structurally sound. No pests, no issues with the pipes or the floorboards. They bought a motion-activated camera. James tested it carefully before mounting it, waved his hand in front of it at different distances, walked past it slowly and quickly, adjusted the sensitivity. It triggered every single time. 2 full days of testing, not one false activation. He mounted it in the hallway, pointed at the bedroom door. They did not tell each other how much they were hoping it would catch something, how much easier it would be if there was something on the footage, something explainable, an animal, a drafty window, anything with a cause. 3 nights in a row, the camera triggered at 3 a.m. They sat together the morning after the first trigger and watched the footage on a laptop. They went through it twice. James replayed it a 3rd time. Slower. Nadia watched the 3rd replay with her hand over her mouth. Neither of them said anything. The hallway was empty. The camera had triggered. The timestamp showed activation. But there was nothing in the footage that should have triggered it. No movement, no person, no shadow, no animal. Just the hallway, empty, and the timestamp. 3:03 a.m. They checked the second night's footage. 3:03 a.m., the third night, 3:03 a.m., same time, 3 nights running. Nadia watched the third video twice. Then she closed the laptop and looked at James. "What do you want to do?" she said. James looked at the hallway. "I think we should leave," he said. They moved out 4 months later. They told the estate agent it was for work reasons. They did not tell her about the hallway. They did not tell her about the camera, or the timestamps, or the cabin. They moved to an apartment in the city. 3rd floor, new building, glass and concrete. Neighbors on all sides, above them, below them, either side. People everywhere. James told me the footsteps have not followed them there. He told me this carefully. The way you say something when you are not entirely sure it is still true. I asked him what he thought it was. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think something at that cabin was already there when we arrived." He paused. "And I think when we left, something came with us." He paused again. "I don't know what it wanted. I don't know why it stopped." He paused. "I just know that 3 weeks after we got home, it was outside our bedroom door at 3 a.m. And I opened that door, because what else do you do?" I didn't have an answer. He thinks about the cabin, about what was on the porch, about the handprints facing in, about whatever came home with them, and walked their hallway, and stood outside their door. It stood outside the door 3 nights in a row, and it never came in, which means it was waiting for something, and James still doesn't know what, or whether it got it, and neither do I. 3 honeymoons. 3 couples who went somewhere beautiful and came back changed. Priya still wakes at 2:17 a.m. sometimes. The couple on the island never went back to Southeast Asia, and James and Nadia moved to an apartment in the city 3 months ago. 3rd floor, new building, neighbors on all sides. James told me the footsteps have not followed them there, not yet. He checks the hallway every night before he sleeps, both directions, every night. He has done this since the first night in the new apartment. He said he does not think he will ever stop. He said he is okay with that, just to be sure, every night, just to be sure. Subscribe for more late night stories, a new one every week. Maybe check who is breathing in the corner before you fall asleep tonight. And if you hear something that shouldn't be there, don't turn on the light. Good night.